go. Keep it coming. Push, Max. Let's go. 1, rest.
Hey guys, finally here presenting this bite-sized performance solutions for Alex Natera's platform. It took 2 years to make this presentation due to we've been very busy, but I finally got through the data and made in my opinion, a quality presentation on the topic. Hopefully you like it. It's titled, as you see, Training Transfer to Deceleration Performance in Football Players. So introduction. As people know, change of direction performance is a key physical property in team sports. However, we should consider that acceleration and deceleration are distinct properties, and both are linked to better match outcomes. But deceleration is often overlooked, as pointed often by Harper, rightly so. Studies show decelerations occur more often than accelerations in specific sports such as elite football, which demands a specific focus. And not enough sub-phase studies, acute and interventions. So only a small number of studies analyze acceleration and deceleration separately. Most tests report total time. So combining acceleration and deceleration into one outcome. And strength and power metrics are typically correlated with total change of direction time and not isolated to deceleration or acceleration specifically in the same test. And intervention research shows mixed results. Varied training types and inconsistent outcome measures limit conclusions by a recent systematic review by Marvin. And we will highlight this now because the results were actually quite surprising. Conclusion said that for a deceleration-specific outcomes reported in included studies, training was not likely to produce a performance improvement in participants compared to control group. So this is quite depressing in terms of what we know about deceleration. So we're really trying to add just some stuff to this, or literature, let's say. Literature on horizontal deceleration demands. Let's have a look. So high impact force profile. And this is a classic picture that Harper has put on specific platforms, including Sportsmith, a Sportsmith article, which was fantastic. Go read it. So rapid horizontal decelerations elicit the highest ground reaction forces within team sports. Here's a comparison of then contact on horizontal deceleration and maximal velocity initial acceleration. And then impulse characteristics, braking steps exhibit a distinct tall, thin impulse, as you can see from the image. High impact peaks are loading, and loading rates occur within the first 30% stance. And this is Harper's, a lot of citations in this presentation, surprise, surprise, are from Harper. This is his deceleration framework. We will focus today on strength capacities and reactive capacities. And the mechanical demands, both eccentric, isometric, and concentric force output have been associated with deceleration performance and reactive properties. Okay, so coaching insights. Deceleration discussions typically revolve around quadricep strength, in my opinion. And rightly so, they're very important. But also recently, Chen et al. Showed that the potential importance of the calf, and less is known about the hip in deceleration. Okay, so new technology and accessibility to gold standard technology has allowed us to make new leaps in understanding and change direction. We know that force plates are much more accessible now. Here on the second video, we have Muscle Labs technology that would be considered gold standard. And sorry for the video jumping a bit. And let's have a look at the last one, View Motion, which is now artificial intelligence, which we'll go through. There we go. Yeah, so very, very cool with this development as it's accessible to most people. So idea behind Pilot. Our aim was to shed more light on what physical tests may explain variance in improvements in acceleration versus deceleration on an individual level. Okay, so here are the methods. So design and participants, pre-post pilot over 6 months, which was exciting because most interventions are too short, in my opinion, to get proper results. And this was within a semi-professional football cohort or a HJK club, 04. It's a reserve team of Helsinki and Jalkapalloklubi. So it's the biggest professional club in Finland, which plays in the first division, so not the main. We had 8 participants that did the entire study and 8 dropouts. Due to different reasons, scheduling is very difficult in these scenarios, but we still got some interesting data, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. So timeline was from 10th of February 2023 to August 2023. As I mentioned, it took me 2 years to go through this. And change of direction assessment was then done with this 10:05 test via view motion, artificial intelligence and extracting instantaneous acceleration versus deceleration velocity curves. So let's have a look at this more specifically. And thanks to Jonas Dudu and cooperation with him and HJK, we could do this. So he was a part of the study. And we filmed at 4K, 60 frames per second, and the sprint with the best time was then further analyzed with the artificial intelligence. And just so we're focusing on the right thing today, I highlighted this part of the curve, and people understand the biomechanics here. So we have the velocity curve here, maximal velocity peaks there, and this would be then the deceleration area, and making an average of this would be then the average deceleration. And here also you would calculate time to stop and distance to stop, a very good metrics to depict deceleration performance. And also average deceleration has shown better reliability versus early and late deceleration. And in the 505 test, average of reliability has shown an coefficient of variation of 5.3%. And time to stop has shown better reliability than distance to stop, which is good to know. And in this study, we'll not focus on kinematics, but we can speculate definitely. Okay, so next part, physical tests, maximal isometric hip extension strength at 90 degrees, knee flexion, used also in Wild et al. Study in 2022 on acceleration, and then reactive strength index 10-5 test, both bilaterally and unilaterally. And then we did counter movement jump test, but there was an issue in the post data, so it won't be reported today. And let's jump into the physical test. So we have high time constraints, as most people do in these professional / semi-professional environments, but we did the 90-degree test, and same as Wild et al. And the instructions were explosive 3-second contraction. And then we did RSI tests. Okay, so RSI performance, as we know, is associated with deceleration performance, whereas 90 degrees is more potential acceleration. Trained sprinters typically demonstrate higher RSI, and RSI contact times and height analyzed separately, because we know we have some ratio always is important to also look at separately. Okay, so jumping into the hypothesis based on initial correlations, we did some in the start. So here's a heat map. So basically we saw that the 90-degree position, not surprisingly, correlated well with peak velocity. But the unilateral RSI was outperformed the bilateral in correlating to many metrics, including deceleration and acceleration, including total time. But we're more interested today in the peak velocity versus average deceleration. So that was then our hypothesis that these two would then be important to change for different purposes. And then good, I've written here, hip extension and unilateral RSI seem relatively independent, as you can see highlighted in green, and also peak velocity and average deceleration, but not as much. So this time, this also informed what we wanted to emphasize to the strength conditioning coach in the team. So remember, I was not coaching these athletes, and I will talk about Himi's work here later. So then the training periodization built by the strength and conditioning coach. Let's go through this. So on Monday, 2 days MD after match day, they had a traditional strength training and bios and ballistic session. We won't go through this in detail today, but this is a very normal and good program built by Timmy Pettersson. You go follow him, very good S&C coach. And then we had the Wednesday. This was more speed skill work plus plyometrics. And important in these interventions at this level that we also treat deceleration as a skill. And that model was taken by Timmy from Dos Santos' review and practical applications paper. We won't go through this now, but you can open this paper and see these great tables that inform practitioners quite well. And then we had post -1 from match day isometrics, and this was the exciting idea. So Jonas and me were we thought our really only request was that please do isometrics so we see clear improvements in the hip extension 90 test, and these are all the exercises he did, because of course you have to prepare the athlete for many things in football, but he did both the 90 and 40. The 40 is then indeed Alex Natero's, the one that he uses the most. Okay, so let's jump forward. Group results. So before we go into the exciting individual results, let's have a look at this. So we saw a large effect improvement in the total time for 10:05 test, and also deceleration improved with a medium effect size, not significant, however, in these sample sizes, but we're more focused on the effect size. Then physical variables here, quite interesting results. So we got very large improvement in terms of effect size in hip extension strength. However, it was interesting with this unilateral RSI. In fact, there was a small effect for decrease, or that conduct times increased, which would be a decrement in performance, but the height increased on a group level. Now, I'm emphasizing the word group level because we're more interested soon in the individual results. So let's jump into those. Okay, so this was a really exciting result, which we will depict more, but basically the changes in hip extension force correlated significantly with deceleration metrics. And although there was a trend, which I will discuss too, about maximal velocity, this was a surprise as a result, and the correlation was quite high, as you can see, highlighted in the heat map. And let's look at the RSI. So RSI with its changes, but specifically contact time, correlated with the changes in, again, deceleration metrics significantly, which was, again, this was less surprising indeed, but important to emphasize that indeed not the ratio, but contact time. And they seem to both be independent again from each other, which is important for establishing what advice to give to coaches. And no correlations to maximal velocity, although trends are present, for example, for the 9 degrees. And in a larger sample size, I would speculate they would have reached significance, especially the 90 degrees. But the unilateral is quite close, and we know it's an important property, so the RSI property for acceleration. I will talk about this later. Okay, so these two correlations, this was the big result in this study. So we have on the y-axis change in average deceleration in percent, and then we have a change in hip extension force on this figure on the left, and on the right, RSI contact. So basically, RSI change in hip extension explained 56% of variance, and then RSI contact 52% of variance, which is quite exciting. However, we want to ask, what if we add this in a multiple or linear regression model together? So let's do this and see if it improves the explained variance. So in this case, we would want to result maybe above 60%. We got 81.8%, a significant result, very exciting for this in terms of a pilot. And here is the actual model. Now, we won't go through the statistics here, but you can use this data. I'm no statistician. That's why I took some help from ChatGPT, but it can take into these beta coefficients and actually get some practical information on how much we need to change one or the other metric to get a specific result. Now let's go through this. This was really cool, I thought. So again, I'm repeating myself, but multiple linear regression results used to calculate what it takes to change average deceleration by 6%. I will explain this, why we use 6% soon. So we use relative changes in 90 hip force and relative changes in RSI contact time. And I'm putting this really clearly like this, so you can replicate it if you want. And 6% target is based on one studies that we presented earlier, Philip et al.'s results of the coefficient of variation of 5.3%. So we want to be over that to be sure it's a real result. And then ChatGPT used the standardized beta coefficients in the previous table used to estimate effect size, and required predictor changes calculate proportionally based on the beta coefficient, and allows weighted interpretation of variable importance in outcomes. So let's have a look at the results. So based on a 6% improvement in deceleration, we need to improve in a full model hip extension in theory by roughly 10%, and RSI contact needs to be reduced by 3%. And if it done separately, as we can see, if we only train the hip, we would need to train it much more to get a similar result, and same with contact. So this is a very practical advice. Of course, it will likely get a bit more accurate in a larger sample size, but this is already something practical we can jump on and try out. And I think many studies should aim to report something similar for coaches. So going back to this figure here, we're also excited because we filmed the videos, right? So let's take an example of one athlete that improved. Okay, so I highlighted the athlete here in both his hip extension and RSI time. Yeah, let's have a look. So here's a video I made of him pre-post. Sorry, let's jump back. There we go. And again, we didn't focus on kinematics, but we can speculate his improvements in August there might be related to this. He reached a higher maximal velocity and started his deceleration later. February it was there, and now it was 5.5 meters here. You can watch this video again just to understand all the components, but all these metrics improved, and his position in the change direction position was visually definitely better. Okay, so let's jump forward. So key findings: specific forms of maximal strength and plyometric training seem to have high potential to transfer to horizontal deceleration within a program that includes skill training in semi-professional football players. Specifically, hip extension force output and unilateral RSI biased via contact time seem highly relevant to improve within a deceleration program. And let's try to understand this. So I wanted to go through the hip extension force first, and I Zoomed these days, not Skyped, with Berhal et al. He made a very good study last year on deceleration. Definitely go read this. And I wanted to understand or confirm within that I'm actually interpreting his data correctly. So let's have a look at his data. And he shared this really cool video with me. And let's have a look. So here we go. So there is a figure on the left with the kinematics from the hip and knee, and then the external force output, both vertical and horizontal, you see on the right. And next, we will go through the muscle forces to understand what's going on here during these high peaks of external force. And as we're interested in the hip, I've highlighted the glutes max and hamstrings that were reported in the study and summarized the quadriceps muscles together. And we will go through this in different phases because Berhal et al. And Harper is involved in this, by the way. They highlighted this into 3 sections. So the first phase would be high eccentric glute demands and tibialis anterior, and then concentric hamstring demands. So yes, the hip is highly involved in the initial contact phase, which was a big learning for me. I wasn't expecting that it was this much involved, which would explain our results, that it was important. And then phase 2, then the quads kick in at very high velocities. That's important to emphasize here. So the vastus and rectus femoris and also the soleus forces are high. And then the phase 3 would be high eccentric rectus femoris forces. So yeah, this was the explanation for this. And then we go into the explanation for unilateral RSI results. So obviously hip strength isn't enough. So contact times improvements are likely more related to rate-specific adaptation at the ankle and knee. And I've done some EMG in my gym. And here's the results from that. Me doing the RSI test now with free hands, but still the results are the same. I measured tibialis anterior and gastrocnemius EMG, as you can see in the red and the green, and the force output. And what I did actually was to prove a point of how important the eccentric phase EMG is for the gastrocnemius. There was a high correlation between each jump's RSI performance and EMG. Now, although I summarized only RSI, it's more accurate in this part not to just isolate contact times, but we know that RSI biases towards contact time. So this result is very relevant to what we want to improve in our athletes. Okay, so ankle and knee influence on contact time. Shorter contact times in 10-5 RSI tests are likely reflect improved ankle stiffness and faster knee extensor force development, enabling quicker transitions through the stretch shortening cycle. An interesting fact, hip extension 90 RSI contact time ratio as a key metric also in acceleration. And let's have a look at that. So I made this figure. So it seems like that ratio is great for a practical tool for deceleration too. I mean, this correlation is nearly perfect. So you can use this also as a practitioner. And what we still need to know a lot, but one big update will be isometric testing for hip, knee, and ankle, and isolating acceleration plus deceleration performance. Also using more demanding deceleration tasks to better showcase visits. And training thoughts, programs that emphasize simultaneous improvements in maximal strength, including ISOs and reactive strength, might have carryover. And I want to bring out Danny Lum's guide to combining isometric and plyometric training that has been endorsed by Alex Natera. On his website, you can find it at the Performance Connect. Very good stuff. And improving RSI contact times can be done in multiple ways, as it's a proxy measure of lower limb joint stiffness regulation, but we won't go through that too much today. And remember, very important, this was only a pilot study with a bunch of limitations. So, but very exciting results still. And I'm very thankful to be able to finally present this to you and speculate together, but hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. And let me know if you have any questions. Go follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm trying to be more active these days on Instagram and not just on Twitter, or sorry, these days X. And thank you very much, Jonas Dudu, for cooperating with HJK with ViewMotion. Fantastic stuff. Thank you to Timi Pettersson, SNC coach, Joni Ruuskanen, Niklas Virtanen for helping to organize and helping with testing. Thank you also to HJK athletes and our test helpers, Heini Sami, Annika Nikander, Xavi Candenas, sorry. Goodbye.
Go, 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 go! Keep it coming! Push, 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 push! Push, Max! Let's go! 1, rest!